The 3.23 Challenge League, Affliction, is launching soon. In this video, I want to go over everything we currently know about Affliction's league mechanic and rewards, potential farming strategies, as well as the implications this league mechanic will have on what build you should play and Atlas strategies. That way you can jump into the league with everything you need to hit the ground running. First up, let's go over everything we know about the league mechanic. Affliction is mechanically similar to Delirium. Near the entrance of each zone, you'll find a sacred wisp that takes you to the Wildwood. This is an area that is shrouded in darkness. As you explore the darkness, the energy of the sacred wisp will be expended, allowing you to explore a limited amount before running out of energy and getting kicked back out to your map. Your goal in the Wildwood is primarily to collect wisps, while keeping an eye out for Asmeri wanderers and bosses. Wisps are auto-collected from just walking through them or from killing enemies in the Wildwood. These wisps are added to a running tally in the lower right of your screen, and when you leave the Wildwood, these wisps are released into your map, empowering monsters. Empowered monsters are stronger, similar to Delirium and Torment spirits. The way empowerment works is that after you leave the Wildwood, each monster in your map has some percentage chance of getting possessed by each wisp independently. The more wisps of that type you collect, the higher that chance is. Monsters can be possessed by more than one type of wisp, making them significantly deadlier, but multiplying together the rewards granted by the wisps. As for those rewards, each wisp has a different effect. Primal wisps give the monster a bonus to item rarity, while the wisps give them a bonus to item quantity, and vivid wisps being a bit different in causing that monster to drop currency items. These effects are presumably multiplicative with map and monster item quantity and item rarity modifiers. I assume they won't be multiplicative with player magic finding, because if they are, we're about to see the return of the very unpopular arch-nemesis magic find color strategies. Something that's very important to note is that the empowerment doesn't just affect monsters that are in your map at the time you complete the Wildwood. The percentage chance to be empowered is rolled for every single monster that spawns into your map afterwards as well. This means that league mechanics that spawn in enemies can make full use of these reward boosting mechanics. I'll have a lot more to say about how you can utilize these effects later in the video, so for now let's move on to talk about Wildwood Ascendancies. Wildwood Ascendancies are 3 new Ascendancies that you'll be able to unlock through Affliction content. You can choose one of these Ascendancies to gain in addition to your regular class Ascendancy. This is just pure power that you get on top of everything else. You unlock these Ascendancies by finding the associated Asmeri wanderer in the Wildwood. If you choose to take their Ascendancy, you'll immediately gain the first 2 points and start a quest line to get the remaining 6. You can respec to a different Ascendancy by finding another Asmeri wanderer. The Warden gives you access to a new item called Tinctures. The Warlock has curse and life-related passives, and the Primalist instead has sockets that you can socket charms into. The Primalist also notably has a skill that causes your war cries to open chests and make corpses drop additional loot. Each of these Ascendancies has minor nodes that grants an increase to wisps of a certain type collected in the Wildwood. So let's talk about Tinctures, Charms, and Corpses. The same Asmeri Wanderer NPCs that let you ascend double as vendors, letting you trade in wisps you've collected in the Wildwood in exchange for Tinctures, Corpses, or Charms, all of which are unmodifiable but tradable. Tinctures go into a flask slot, but are not flasks. They grant passive bonuses to your equipped weapon, and you can have 1 tincture active at a time. Charms have 1 to 2 affixes, and are miniature versions of existing class Ascendancy passives. For example, one of the preview charms has the Cursed enemies you kill explode as chaos damage passive from the Occultist, except at a 13% chance instead of a 50% chance. I expect that certain combinations of affixes on charms will be extremely powerful, sought after by many players, and incredibly valuable. Lastly, the third Wanderer sells corpses. Corpses are consumable items that spawn a specific corpse on the ground. These corpses can be used with minion skills like Raise Spectre, or for the Warlock's Ravenous skill. Unfortunately, these specters will not spawn additional corpses once raised with Desecrate, so if your specter dies, you will have to purchase additional corpses to re-summon them. Which sounds awful, but if they're powerful enough, I'm sure some players will use them despite the clunkiness. Now that we've done a quick run through of how everything in Affliction works, I want to start talking about strategies for the Affliction League. The very first choice you'll be making is what Ascendancy to pick. The very first thing I want to note is that you are not locked into your first choice of Ascendancy at all. If you want to respec points within an Ascendancy, it's only 1 refund point instead of the usual 5. All it takes to switch to a new Ascendancy is to find the appropriate NPC, switching back to a previous Ascendancy retains quest progress, and the final quest is shared across all Ascendancies. As a result, I recommend players initially pick their first Ascendancy based on what will be most powerful at the start of the league, and transition to another Ascendancy later on if they so wish. And I'm going to make a pretty strong blanket recommendation here. I think for almost every build, Warden is the correct Ascendancy to pick first. This is for 2 reasons. First, the Warden passive Oath of the Magi can grant a number of bonuses that are incredibly valuable early in a league. Most notably, 30% movement speed if you don't have any gems socketed in your boots, which is a price you will be happy to pay while leveling and in early maps. The boost to your progression from that one node alone will simply be huge. I cannot imagine any of the other Ascendancies being able to hold a candle to that in a league start scenario. The other reason is that each Ascendancy has small nodes that grant increases to Wisps collected of a specific type, and the type associated with Warden is Vivid Wisps, the ones that make monsters drop currency. As I'm going to talk about next, we don't really know how powerful these currency drops are going to be. It might just amount to a few Chaos Orbs on average every map. But early in a league, getting several raw Chaos Orbs every map is actually really, really good. You're going to want every scrap of currency you can get, even minor currency, and I suspect being a Warden will really boost your early currency acquisition. Something you can even do to double down on this is to start out by just taking the small nodes. Just grab Oath of the Magi and put your next 3 points into small nodes that boost the amount of Vivid Wisps you get. If it turns out this isn't the huge boost to currency I expect it to be, respeccing to something else is cheap and easy. The risk is extremely low and the payoff is extremely high. The next thing I want to talk about is the potential for raw currency farming with Vivid Wisps. Anyone who was around for the Magic Find culling era of Arch Nemesis, Solaris, and Lunaris touched farming knows that guaranteed currency drops that scale with item quantity and item rarity can be absolutely busted. During Kalandra League, players who went all in on this strategy could sometimes get loot explosions with potentially dozens of Divine Orbs dropping at once. Now, I don't expect this to get nearly as insane as that did. Mostly because players hated it so much, I have to imagine that GGG is going to make it so that Vivid Wisp currency drops don't scale with player item quantity and rarity. However, GGG did show off a map boss empowered by all 3 types of Wisps, dropping a bunch of currency, including a Divine Orb. While many players have been focusing on the Ascendancies, I believe that these Vivid Wisp currency drops are going to turn out to be the main focus of farming strategies. I expect it to look like a combination of Delirium and Solaris touched farming, where you run through the Wildwood at the start of your map, load up your map with League mechanics, chasing huge currency drops whenever you get lucky enough to get a monster empowered with all 3 types of Wisps. However, there's one thing about this mechanic that is not yet clear. There are two different paths you can go down when farming currency this way. The first is to try and fill your map with as many monsters as possible, and the second is to try and get triple empowerment on powerful unique monsters that innately have high item quantity and rarity bonuses, in the hopes of getting the sort of ridiculous loot explosions you saw in Calandra League. Something that's key to note for that first method is that the currency rewards from Vivid Wisps actually double dip on pack size. This is because the monsters in the Wildwood that drop Wisps scale from pack size, and you'll also have more monsters in your maps for the Wisps to empower. So that's more monsters with a higher percentage chance for each monster to drop currency. If you go this route, there are many League mechanics you can target that spawn huge numbers of enemies. Abyss is quite notable for how many monsters it spawns with full Atlas investment, but Incursion can have rooms full of magic monsters, Blight spawns tons, and Breach Ritual and Eldritch Altars all add huge quantities of monsters to your map. On the other hand, back during Calandra League, unjuiced monsters with guaranteed currency drops weren't the ones dropping huge currency explosions. It was unique and rare monsters with huge bonuses to item quantity and item rarity stacked on them. So how can you scale these bonuses even further? Well, the main mechanics are Torment Spirits, Delirium, and Expedition Encounters. Torment Spirit possession grants increases to item rarity and quantity, Delirium does the same, and Expedition can add modifiers to excavated monsters that even further increases item quantity and rarity. This infamous screenshot of a player receiving dozens of Divine Orbs is, in fact, a combination of all three. A Torment-possessed Expedition runic monster on a 100% Delirious map. Additionally, you can try to cram your maps full of as many unique, boss, and rare monsters as you possibly can. Multi-boss maps, the Maven Keystone that summons additional bosses, Rogue Exiles, Conqueror maps, Betrayal, and Expedition are all mechanics that have a lot of potential here. Something else to note is that a lot of the mechanics I just mentioned for this rarity-based strategy are either on the Atlas device this league, or were rebalanced in 3.23. The fact that the Seance Notable was nerfed, the Maven Keystone was changed to always summon the extra bosses, and Rogue Exiles and Torment are both on the map device this league, tells me that this is perhaps the direction that GGG expects players to go with the Affliction mechanic. Based on that, there are a few Atlas farming strategies I want to highlight. The first is pack size Scarabs with Eldritch Altars and Harvest. This strategy has already been popular in past leagues, but is notable here because it also double dips on scaling with pack size. This is because more pack size means more Eldritch Altars means more area item quantity from altars, and Harvest rewards scale off both pack size and item quantity. Not only does this combine well with scaling Vivid Wisp currency drops, but the additional area item quantity from the altars will presumably also scale the Vivid Wisp currency drops, meaning that you're now triple dipping on increases to pack size. This is something I'm very keen to try out using Scarabs to juice pack size. Next up is the strategy that I'm planning to try out on League Start, stuffing the map with as many unique and boss monsters as possible. Rogue Exiles with the Atlas passive that makes every Rogue Exile possessed, running City Square for 3 map bosses per map, along with the Maven Keystone for extra map bosses. Ideally running Conqueror maps for an extra boss, and the ability to run nothing but City Squares over and over. Next up is one that I think might be fantastic on League Start, Blight, Incursion, and Ritual. These 3 League mechanics all spawn tons of monsters, and have the unique property that all of the loot from these monsters is vacuumed up and dropped as one big pile of loot at the end. This is great for farming bubblegum currency, as it will combine them all into neat stacks for you to pick up. And finally, the one that I suspect may be completely broken, Expedition, Torment, and Delirium. It broke the economy in Calandra League, and may just do it again in Affliction. once players have powerful enough characters to actually do something that difficult, of course. I also want to highlight a few League mechanics that have some amount of anti-synergy with Affliction. The first is Harbinger. While Harbinger is great consistent income, its rewards can't be scaled by things like quantity and rarity, and Harbinger monsters won't drop loot. It just isn't scaled by Affliction in any way. The second is, perhaps surprisingly, Delirium. I know I mentioned that it will probably be used to create the most disgusting loot explosions we'll see this league, but there's still some serious anti-synergy here. The bonuses to item quantity and rarity provided by Delirium are additive with other sources, but the difficulty boost it gives to monsters is multiplicative. Now, if you have a mirror tier character capable of deleting literally anything in the game, then yes, Delirium will increase the rewards you get from Affliction. But for the vast majority of characters, I suspect the bump in difficulty of making empowered rares 100% delirious will just be too much for players to handle. It's going to be one or the other. And I suspect Affliction will be better than Delirium for raw currency farming. And finally, the big one, Ultimatum. I know, everyone is excited about the return of Ultimatum. I myself have been begging for its return ever since starting this YouTube channel. But Ultimatum has been changed. Monsters in Ultimatum encounters no longer drop loot. This means that it doesn't interact with Affliction in any way. Or at least it wouldn't, except that there's one Ultimatum monster that does drop loot, the Trial Master. Which means the Trial Master can be empowered by Wisps, making your Ultimatum encounter way more difficult, potentially causing you to fail when it matters most, in exchange for getting probably very little currency on average. It's just not worth it. And it could be even worse. Despite Ultimatum monsters being unable to drop loot, it's possible that it might be possible for them to be empowered by Affliction anyways. Meaning that if you run Affliction in a map that you intend to do an Ultimatum encounter in, you might end up getting all the difficulty boosts from Affliction with none of the rewards. While I think this is unlikely, the reality is that any time spent doing Ultimatum is time not spent doing League mechanics that would have their rewards boosted by Affliction. In order to be worth doing at all, Ultimatum rewards would have to be so completely cracked that it's worth farming over the current League mechanic, which to me seems unlikely. There are a few other potential farms I wanted to mention real quick, but won't go into detail on as I need to get this video out before the League launches. The first is that while I've been focused on the currency Wisp for most of this video, it should be noted that the item quantity Wisp will likely be very powerful for divination card farming. If you're the sort of person that likes to run Crimson Temple all League, this is definitely something you should be trying to take advantage of. And finally, something that will be relevant to absolutely everyone. Some of the charms from the Asmeri Wanderer vendors will be highly sought after, meaning they will be lucrative if sold. You're going to want to keep an eye on the prices for various affixes on charms, so that you don't miss out on items on the vendors that could be worth a significant number of divines. And for my last topic, I want to briefly touch on build choice for Affliction. Unfortunately, it's not really clear what sort of build will be best for Affliction because it can interact with so many different League mechanics and we don't yet know what the winning strategy will be. If juiced up bosses and races end up having the best rewards, you'll want to build with strong single target. If quantity of monsters ends up best, you'll want a clear speed build. You might want to hedge your bets and pick something that can do both. Personally, I have my eye on an explosive arrow ballista build. It can make use of the Tinctures I'll have access to with the Wildwood Ascendancy, can delete the most juiced up bosses in the game, and also has pretty good clear speed if needed. That's all for this video though. In the description and comments below, I've linked my written guide to Affliction with all the information we have available to us. This guide will be updated as we learn more, so you ought to bookmark it to stay up to date on everything. I'd also love to hear what you guys are thinking about Affliction. In particular, any plans you guys have on how you're going to use the Affliction mechanic. Do you think it'll be better to fill maps with as many monsters as possible, or focused on making the most juiced up rares and bosses you can? Any cool interactions with Affliction that I didn't mention? There is a heck of a lot of League mechanics in PoE, and surely I haven't thought of all the cool stuff you can do with it. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.